I've been working in baseball media for about 4 years now, and one of the most unfortunate fun facts that I've learned through my years of corralling baseball trivia is that the New York Mets have never won an MVP. They're wrapping up their 62nd season as a franchise, and they're one of just 3 teams to be recognized for this lowly non-accomplishment, alongside the Tampa Bay Rays and Arizona Diamondbacks, both of whom have been around essentially only a third of the time that the Mets have existed. Sure, they've claimed 7 Cy Young Awards in this window, but it's mind-boggling to believe that through 2 World Series victories and dozens of winning seasons, the Mets have never been able to say that they've had the best position player in their respective league. This season, Francisco Lindor is making a compelling case. He's well on his way to a second consecutive 30 home run, 30 stolen base season, while on pace to play all 162 games. But even in his best season, not only as a Mets player, but perhaps the best season of his entire career, he'll likely be outdone by somebody else. Shohei Ohtani. He's on the fast track towards the first ever 50-50 season in MLB history, who played in the American League his entire career up until this year. Barring a massive change, he's going to join a long list of Mets players who have had amazing seasons in this uniform, but have fallen just short of winning MVP, and today's video is about that long list of players. And I actually hope the title of this video soon becomes outdated. Now, before we dive in, let's set some quick ground rules. This video is about the Mets players who came closest to winning MVP, not necessarily the best Mets seasons ever. So you may see certain seasons that weren't the best of that individual player's tenure in New York, as they're included solely because of how the writers decided to vote on it at year's end. Also, there are gonna be some notable omissions from this list because I had to comb through 60 years of team history. So to spare a future comment, here are some names that failed to make the cut on today's video. Jerry Koosman in 1968 and 69, who pitched spectacularly but never emerged from Tom Seaver's shadow, finishing outside the top 20 in MVP voting. Kevin McReynolds in 1988, who put up a 2020 season and actually finished 3rd in MVP voting. This is the highest placing that didn't make the cut in today's video. There's going to be a lot of 1980s Mets though. John Olerud in 1998, who hit an absurd 354 with an OPS near 1000, but somehow didn't even crack the top 10 of voting. People forget that he was a terrific Met. Edgardo Alfonso in 1999 and 2000, who was definitely my most heartbreaking snub here, but he simply got overshadowed by Mike Piazza's dominance in the same window. And finally, R.A. Dickey in 2012, who is my personal favorite Met of all time. He dominated the National League, leading the league in innings pitched, strikeouts, and complete games in a Cy Young season, though he only finished 14th in NL MVP voting. And there's a handful of Cy Young winning pitchers on this list, so he'll just miss the cut today. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's go. An easy and logical place to start this video is the 1969 Mets, basically the first successful team in franchise history that also happened to win the World Series. Prior to 1969, this team lost over 100 games 5 times in 7 years, which seems impossible. This also includes the historical mark for the worst regular season record in the modern era in their first season in 1962, when they went 40, 120, and 1. But I think this record is actually going to get claimed from them pretty soon. These miracle Mets were 6.5 games back of the division lead on August 1st, but a torrid 46-18 run to close the season catapulted them to an 100-win campaign, launching them into the postseason for the first time in franchise history. On that playoff run, they dropped just 1 game on their way to a World Series win. Cleon Jones led the charge in the lineup, hitting .340 with an OPS over 900 in the full season. But the biggest reason for the Mets' swift turnaround from laughingstock of the league to champions was Tom Seaver. Joining New York as a rookie in 1967, Seaver would go on to smash and set every major pitching record in the franchise's history. 6 decades later, he's still the Mets' all-time leader in pitching WAR, innings pitched, and strikeouts among many other things, and he managed to claim 3 Cy Young Awards during his dozen seasons in the blue and orange. The closest he came to winning MVP, though, came in that fateful 1969 season, where Seaver actually finished runner-up to the Giants' Willie McCovey, both of whom received 11 votes for first place. It's one of the narrowest margins of victory in the history of the award, despite the fact that Willie McCovey led all National League hitters in home runs and RBIs, and all MLB hitters in on-base percentage, slugging clip, and OPS. This just speaks to the dominance of Tom Seaver that season, though I maintain that McCovey certainly deserved the honors, considering this wasn't even the best season of Tom Seaver's storied career. That year, Seaver won a franchise record 25 games, tossing a Herculean amount of innings and yielding the fewest hits against him of any NL pitcher that year. He's one of just 24 pitchers in the past 60 years to achieve a season with over 250 innings pitched and an ERA that's 65% better than league average, according to ERA+. Seaver is one of just 4 pitchers to do this feat 3 times, alongside Roger Clemens, Juan Marichal, and Greg Maddux. Following 1969, Seaver had 2 seasons that were actually far better than his championship campaign. Specifically, in 1971, Seaver led MLB in ERA, whip, and strikeout per nine rate with an NL leading 289 strikeouts, also a career high. Speaking of the 1970s, the Mets don't have many esteemed candidates to show for themselves in this decade. Up until his untimely trade in 1977, Tom Seaver continued to be the most valuable player on the team on an annual basis. On the hitting side of things, the Mets continued to fail in their pursuit of a star-level position player throughout the decade. That is, until 1983, when GM Frank Cashin orchestrated arguably the most important trade in franchise history, kickstarting a march to a second World Series victory in 3 years' time. 3 years after winning co-MVP honors with Willie Stargell, a feat that has yet to be repeated in MLB history, first baseman Keith Hernandez was on the outs with the St. Louis Cardinals. In the middle of the 1983 season, with both teams trending nowhere and rifts between Hernandez and the Cardinals, St. Louis and New York made a lopsided trade where the Mets acquired the future all-time leader in Gold Glove awards. Keith Hernandez's impact on the team was immediate, stepping into a much-needed leadership role and leading the team to a winning season in 1984, which was their first winning season in 8 years. This 1984 season would be Keith's closest attempt at hoisting a second MVP award onto his decorated mantle. Though Hernandez lacked the usual thump that you'd expect from a first baseman, he had perhaps the most disciplined eye in the sport at the time. He's actually just one of 20 qualified first basemen in the last 40 years of MLB play to post a 6-WAR season while hitting over 300 with an on-base percentage over 400. This is a dynamic combination of plus defense, great plate discipline, and an ability to get out on the field every day. Still, as great as Keith Hernandez was in this 90-win season for the Mets, he and many others in the National League stood no chance against Ryne Sandberg, who claimed 22 of 24 first-place votes en route to a clean victory. Ah well. Nice season, pretty boy.
You said, nice game, pretty boy. You remember.
But 1984 started a chain of Mets players finishing in the top 5 of NL MVP voting every season until 1992, which was an 8-year span. The year after, Doc took center stage in what I believe is the first and maybe the biggest example of a Mets player being snubbed of the MVP. It might sound weird considering that Doc is very obviously a pitcher, but bear with me. The year before, Dwight Gooden took the league by storm with one of the most dominant rookie campaigns in the history of the sport. Dr. K became the youngest All-Star in MLB history to that point, blowing away hitters with a heater that sat at 98 miles per hour routinely, which may not seem like big news these days, but was a very big deal back in the 1980s. He led every pitcher in the sport with 276 strikeouts and 5.5 wins above replacement as a freaking 19-year-old. What were you doing at 19? Picking your nose in a college lecture? Not helping your dad put in mulch in the lawn? I'm sorry, I don't want to make this a personal attack. If all that sounds good, well then just buckle up, because this isn't even the season we're talking about. In 1985, Doc Gooden pitched maybe the greatest pitching season ever.
Hey, Catfish, that curveball of yours, how'd you get it to drop so far?
First you take a cold Diet Pepsi. Then you slide your fingers down the side. And then let her rip.
Hey, Catfish, that's illegal.
Gooden led Major League Baseball with 24 wins, an otherworldly 1.53 ERA, and 268 strikeouts, claiming the pitching Triple Crown and winning the National League Cy Young Award unanimously. By Baseball Reference's wins above replacement, it's statistically the most valuable pitching season ever, sitting above some of the best pitchers in the history of baseball at a mark of 12.2. By ERA, it's the second best season I could find among starters in the last 60 years, trailing only the great Bob Gibson's mark of 1.12 in 1968. If you prefer to go by ERA+, a stat that adjusts ERA on a league-wide scale that also accounts for stadium factors, his mark is only outdone by Pedro Martinez, Bob Gibson, and Greg Maddux among qualified starting pitchers in the expansion era. Over half of his starts in that season were complete games, and my arm hurts just saying that sentence out loud. With the 98-win Mets pushing hard for a playoff berth, Gooden didn't allow a single earned run in the entire month of September, with 44 scoreless innings pitched over 6 starts and 39 strikeouts to just 9 walks. Perhaps a postseason berth might have put Doc over the edge in the MVP race, but he ended up with just one first-place vote as the Mets finished second in the division, with honors being handed over to the Cardinals' everyday center fielder, Willie McGee, who never received an MVP vote in any other season of his 18-year career. Now, McGee was great in his own right, leading the league with 216 hits and a .353 batting average, but in my opinion, these numbers paled in comparison to the alien performance of Doc Gooden that year. This loss for Doc feels like a true snub. And let's say you're one of those people that thinks the pitcher should never win an MVP award. Fine. You still could have given it to a Mets position player that season. You actually could have given it to the guy that was squatting behind the dish every fifth day when Doc took the mound. A year after leading the National League in RBIs as an everyday backstop, Gary Carter was shipped off to the New York Mets via trade from the Montreal Expos. And before you ask what the Expos got in return, don't even ask, because it's the Expos. It was a bad trade. See Randy Johnson, or Pedro Martinez, or Tim Raines, or Bartolo Colon, or in New York, Gary Carter became one of just 9 catchers in the past 40 years with a 30-homer, 100 RBI season. In the same window, Carter's 1985 campaign is the 7th best season by B-WAR, trailing only Mike Piazza, who we'll get to in a little bit, as well as Joe Mauer, Buster Posey, Yadier Molina, and Gary Carter from a year prior. His marks were propelled by his elite plate discipline and knack for avoiding punchouts. At 69 walks and just 46 strikeouts on the season, his walk to strikeout ratio landed at 1.5, meaning he drew 3 walks to every 2 strikeouts recorded. This value was certainly ahead of its time and just outside the top 5 marks of any catcher in the last 40 years. But much like Doc Gooden, Carter was unable to capture the NL MVP that year, finishing in 6th place. As the '86 World Series victory came and went, so did the leading guard of the New York Mets offense. During their run to a ring, Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter were the feared faces of the lineup, but lurking behind them was a younger tandem that would step into the spotlight when the club returned to the playoffs in 1988. Gotta quickly interrupt today's video to thank today's sponsor, which is the DraftKings Sportsbook. If sports betting is your thing and you want a little bit more competition with it, every Tuesday, me and my coworkers over here at John Boy Media compete in the DFS Fantasy League, where we set a lineup full of MLB players, trying to accrue the most points possible based on their performance. If you score high enough, you have a shot to win cash prizes, and it only costs $5 to enter. Plus, if you win, you can say that you know more ball than me and basically everybody else that works here. Regardless of that, use promo code Olive today if you're interested. It's a sweet deal, and thanks to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video. First was Darryl Strawberry, who had been a valuable contributor for years since his debut 5 years earlier. After winning National League Rookie of the Year in 1983, Strawberry posted 3 straight 2020 seasons from 1984 to 1986, making the All-Star team every year along the way. In 1987, he stepped it up, becoming only the 10th player in MLB history to that point to join the illustrious 30-30 club.
You're Darryl Strawberry.
Yes.
You play right field.
Yes.
I play right field too.
So?
Well, are you better than me?
Well, I never met you, but yes.
What to do? Smithers, massage my brain.
Yes, sir.
You, Strawberry, hit a home run.
Okay, Skip.
I told him to do that.
The 1988 Mets surged to an 100-win season off the back of their most valuable bat in Darryl Strawberry. He clubbed 39 home runs, which led the National League, but fell just short of the first Mets season with 40 home runs in it. He also fell just 1 stolen base shy of repeating a 30-30 campaign, but this would only be good for a runner-up finish in MVP voting. The 3rd time a Mets player finished runner-up in MVP voting in the last 20 years. The Dodgers' Kirk Gibson, the same man who'd help upset the Mets in that year's NLCS, would claim the honors instead, scoring 6 more first-place votes than Strawberry. You know, we were just talking a lot about 30-30 seasons, and the Mets actually became the first team with multiple 30-30 players on the same roster in the same season. After years of being a quiet contributor in a stacked lineup, third baseman Howard Johnson broke out with a stellar pair of seasons in the late 80s. It was in 1989 where Hojo hit the apex of his talents, leading all Mets hitters with 36 home runs, over 100 RBIs, over 40 stolen bases, and a 928 OPS on the season. In fact, only 2 other primary third basemen have accomplished a 30-30 season in the years since. One is the great Jose Ramirez, who has done so twice, including this very season in 2024. The other, well, we'll get to him in a little bit. Hojo too would fall short of accomplishing the ultimate goal. Boy, I'm getting tired of saying that. We're not even halfway through this damn video, oh my god. Instead, the 1989 honors went to Kevin Mitchell of the Giants, who led Major League Baseball in home runs, RBIs, slugging, and OPS in a dominant season. Ironically enough, before he ever played in the Bay Area, Mitchell was a member of the 1986 Mets. It's hard to believe that with all the talent that came and went from the 1980s Mets, that 1, they only won 1 World Series in this window, and 2, they somehow never won an MVP in this window. As the 1980s came to a close, so did the Mets' dominance in the National League East. The 1990s were an odd decade in this team's history. At one point they wore these uniforms. This pretty much speaks for itself. They also had 6 different managers, a changing of guard in the front office, the departure of beloved franchise faces, and a whole lot of losing. As most Mets fans know, the light at the end of the tunnel came at the turn of the century for this team. And the way you find that light is by listening for the faintest sound of Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baja Men. Do you hear it? But before that respite finally arrived, there was actually a weird blip season of fantastic position player performance from the Mets in 1996. The 1996 Mets lost 91 games in what was their final year before they returned to winning baseball after 6 straight losing seasons. But remarkably, the 1996 squad that won just 71 games housed 3 players that were worth 5 WAR or more on their roster. In fact, only them and the 1998 Mariners have the lowly distinction of rostering this much talent and still not even being able to post a winning record. First was Bernard Gilkey, who arrived from St. Louis via trade and had easily the best season of his dozen-year career in 1996. He clubbed 30 home runs with 117 RBIs and a 955 OPS, which helped him finish in the top 15 of MVP voting. His claim to fame isn't so much this 1996 season, but rather the cameo in Men in Black that the season earned him. The man scoring on many of Gilkey's extra base hits was Lance Johnson, another trade acquisition, this time from the Chicago White Sox. The speedy leadoff center fielder led MLB in at-bats, hits, and triples, trailing only Eric Young Sr. with a 50-steal season. At that point in time, only Mookie Wilson had more steals in a season for the Mets. Johnson finished 4 spots behind Gilkey in MVP voting, but the man who finished behind both of them had the best case in my opinion. That player was catcher Todd Hundley. Hundley was the only homegrown product of the trio, and he made history by becoming just the 3rd switch hitter ever to that point with a 40 home run season, which also happened to be the first such season in franchise history for the Mets, a record that stood for over 2 decades. This came after never even hitting 20 home runs in a season prior, and we don't really need to ask questions about how this breakout happened, guys. Let's just enjoy the good play. After that strange year came and went, the Mets finally began turning a corner in the years that followed. The Mets orchestrated more significant trades for players like Al Leiter and Armando Benitez, as well as key free agent signings for players like John Olerud and Robin Ventura. This helped New York break through with a 97-win season and wildcard berth by the skin of their teeth in 1999. But as you can all guess, the heart and soul of that team was the future Hall of Famer taken with the final pick in the 1988 draft, catcher Mike Piazza. Yeah, not only did Todd Hundley not win MVP for the Mets, he didn't even have the best catching season by a Mets player in this decade. Poor Todd. Piazza clubbed 40 home runs in his first full season with the team in 1999, but his closest shot at winning the MVP award came a year later, when the Mets reached the World Series for the first time in 15 years. He again surpassed 30 home runs and 100 RBIs with ease, and hit for an otherworldly 1.012 OPS as an everyday catcher. It's one of just 4 such seasons in the last 60 years of play, 2 of them being owned by Piazza himself. Even more impressively, it's one of just 2 seasons with a slugging clip over 600 by a catcher in this window. And can you guess who owns both of these seasons? That's right, Mike Piazza.
One of the toughest things about being a catcher is trying to hold on to the ball when an opposing player runs into you trying to score. This is how I practice. And kids, don't try this at home.
Despite making offensive history as a backstop, Piazza unfortunately registered his best numbers in the same window as the rise of the San Francisco Giants, who have now robbed the Mets of MVP awards on 3 separate occasions in this video. Though the Mets would conquer them on their run to the Fall Classic that year, Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent would be the roadblock for Mike Piazza. While Piazza continued to produce at an elite level, he'd never come as close as he did in that 2000 season. Barry Bonds' ensuing stranglehold on NL MVP honors in the following seasons meant no Mets player even came a little bit close for the foreseeable future. The team tumbled back into mediocrity in the early 2000s, and the departures of talents across the board sent them into another rebuild. But with losing seasons came high draft picks and promising prospects, and in 2005, the tides began to shift in New York's favor once again. The speedy Jose Reyes quickly established himself as one of the premier shortstop talents in franchise history. Pitching contracts for Tom Glavine and Pedro Martinez helped aid the chaotic rotation, and New York legend Willie Randolph took over the managerial managerial reins and provided much-needed stability. But perhaps the most impactful move in this transitional period for the Mets was the shocking free agent signing of outfielder Carlos Beltran, who donned the blue and orange thanks to a 7-year, $119 million contract after a torrid playoff run for the Houston Astros. Now, Beltran's first season in 2005 was hardly anything to write home about, and his massive underperformance in his first year as a Met likely played a key role in keeping his team out of the playoffs. But come 2006, with the emergence of young third baseman David Wright and a key trade for first baseman Carlos Delgado, the Mets had all the ammunition they needed to build one of the league's best offenses. Leading the charge that year was Beltran, who broke free of a disappointing inaugural season with a 41 home run campaign to match Todd Hundley, tying a Mets single-season record, in what was also the 5th most by any National League player that year. Only Albert Pujols was worth more wins above replacement in the National League that season, with Beltran adding on Gold Glove caliber defense out in center field. But both of these men would lose out on NL MVP honors that year, with one of the most competitive races ever being won by 26-year-old Ryan Howard, who shattered records across the board with a 58 home run season for the Phillies. Carlos Beltran was certainly the most productive Mets player in their most successful season in 6 years. But the face of the franchise quickly became recognized as the young third baseman donning number 5, who'd soon brand a large C on the chest of his uniform, David Wright. In the year that followed, Wright usurped Beltran as the most important player on the team with a monster season of his own. By wins above replacement, Wright's value of 8.3 B-WAR in 2007 ranks as the most valuable single season in franchise history by a position player. Wright was as well-rounded as it could get that year. He stole bases, he played fantastic defense, he hit for contact and power, and amongst all other things, he was a clubhouse leader. He ranked in the top 5 of the league for on-base percentage and OPS plus to go along with 30 home runs and a Gold Glove. And this helped him join the aforementioned Howard Johnson as the only other third baseman in MLB history with a 30-30 season to that point, with the Mets owning both such seasons, funnily enough. But as if the collapse of September 2007 wasn't enough to torture Mets fans, David Wright's best season of his illustrious career came in perhaps one of the most competitive races yet again, competing against a 50 home run season from Prince Fielder, a batting title from Matt Holliday in the midst of Rocktober. The honors went to shortstop Jimmy Rollins, who set an MLB record with 778 plate appearances and went 30-40 playing every day for the Phillies, the team that would leapfrog the Mets for the National League East title on the final day of the season. This free fall from grace catapulted the Mets into a long stretch of losing baseball. Wright would remain a Met for the duration of his career, but many of the faces that propelled the 2006 team to a dominant season departed from the club. By 2011, the Mets were barely recognizable. Aside from a new stadium, there isn't much to remark about the Mets from 2009 to 2014 and what became a wasteland of missed potential and poor signings. The Mets really wouldn't become relevant again until 2015, where they went on a magic run to the World Series, but much of that came off the back of a well-rounded, young starting rotation. Their next real shot to have an MVP winner on their roster would come a few years down the line. On that run in 2015 that many will remember for years to come, a shaggy-haired 27-year-old former shortstop took center stage as the co-ace of the team alongside Matt Harvey. In the ensuing years, he'd continue to pitch well, albeit with some growing pains as a major leaguer. It wasn't until 2018 when Jacob deGrom cut his hair short and ascended to a level not seen by many pitchers in baseball history. Jacob deGrom won the Cy Young near unanimously in back-to-back seasons from 2018 to 2019, sparing just one first-place vote in both years. But it was his first victory that was easily the most dominant and arguably the closest a Mets pitcher has come to winning MVP since Dwight Gooden in 1985. Other than Zach Greinke in 2015, deGrom posted the lowest single-season ERA mark of any pitcher with 30 starts in a season since Gooden himself over 30 years prior. His 269 strikeouts was the 4th most in a single season by any Mets pitcher, placing him in an elite class alongside Gooden and Seaver, the only other 2 Mets pitchers who came close to challenging for an MVP award. He's one of just a dozen pitchers in the expansion era to pitch over 200 innings with an ERA over 100% better than league average, joined by elite hurlers like Pedro Martinez and Roger Clemens. In 6 seasons since, no starting pitcher has been able to join this exclusive group. What many people remember about his fantastic 2018 campaign was his measly 10 wins. Aside from the Mets' dismal offense that squandered many of his starts, deGrom's season was one of the best, not only in Mets history, but MLB history as well by several different metrics. He did receive a first-place vote for MVP, but the other 29 went to Christian Yelich, who undoubtedly earned the award with a batting title, slugging title, and 36 home runs. deGrom deGrom would get votes again in 2019, but never came as close as he did the year prior. A year after posting a losing record despite the seismic efforts of deGrom, the Mets got the offensive ammo they needed to compete again in upstart rookie first baseman Pete Alonso. In what I consider to be the last great attempt at a Mets player winning MVP, the rookie first baseman shattered a first-year record with 53 home runs in 2019, a total that led all of MLB. Alonso won the home run derby, made the All-Star team, claimed 29 of 30 votes for Rookie of the Year, and set the single-season club record for extra base hits, home runs, and RBIs. These are all marks that still stand 5 years later. And while Pete deservedly garnered all the acclaim amongst rookies that year, he would fall in the background of the NL MVP race, a race that was headlined by the Bellinger versus Yelich matchup. Alonso finished in 7th place with no first place votes, and since Alonso's rookie campaign, no Mets player has finished as high as he did in MVP voting, a stretch that will likely be snapped by Francisco Lindor this season, the very man who began our discussion in the first place. In 60 years of play, the Mets have come painstakingly close to hoisting this award for themselves many times, but to no avail. Whether it be the slightest underperformance or the worst possible timing, something has always gotten in the way of the Mets snapping their drought. Perhaps by the end of the season, this video has a chance to age poorly with an insane run from Lindor, or a slump from Ohtani, or a change of heart for many of the writers who hold the power in those precious ballots. But for now, it's just another weight that Mets fans have to bear throughout the trials of being a fan of this team. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I worked pretty hard on this one and combed through a lot of Mets history. That'll do it for me, and I'll see you guys next time.